We've been conditioned to believe we're advanced, that history is a straight line leading directly to us. But what happens when that line breaks? For centuries, our ancestors faced a far more unforgiving world, armed with something fundamentally more reliable than gadgets. They relied on ingenious design, durable materials, and the proficiency of their own two hands. What if their lost knowledge is the one thing that could actually save you when everything else fails? Today we're exploring 15 of their most brutal and effective survival lessons. These aren't just historical curiosities, they are a masterclass in resilience, a testament to pure mechanical genius and the unyielding will to live. Prepare to look at the world around you in a completely different way. The foundations: water and food. Before shelter, before tools, before anything, survival begins with the absolute basics: water and food. For a medieval peasant, these weren't guaranteed commodities. They were a daily life-or-death challenge that required constant vigilance and a deep practical understanding of the forces of nature. A mistake with either could be your last. Lesson 1. Never trust clear water. We open a tap and drink. We see a clear, running stream, and our modern instincts tell us it's pure. A medieval farmer would know that's a death sentence in disguise. That water could be teeming with invisible bacteria from a dead animal upstream, or waste from a settlement miles away. The consequences weren't just an upset stomach. They were dysentery, cholera, and a swift, agonizing end. So, what was the solution in a world without lab equipment? They developed surprisingly effective field methods. While some folklore mentions tests like floating a leaf to judge a current, the real reliable purification came from more scientific methods. The most obvious, and still the gold standard today, is boiling. A rolling boil kills the vast majority of pathogens. But boiling demands fire, and fire demands fuel, which wasn't always practical for just a drink. This is where they employed another ingenious technique: fermentation. By turning water, grain, and yeast into weak beer or ale, they were effectively sterilizing the liquid. The alcohol content, even if low, made it far safer to drink than most water sources. It's no coincidence. Ale was a staple of the medieval diet. It wasn't about intoxication, it was about hydration. They were, in essence, brewing their way to survival. The lesson is brutal in its simplicity. Assume all water wants to kill you and act accordingly. That right there is a game changer for any modern survivor. But there's another layer to their water wisdom that's equally crucial: location. Medieval people understood watershed dynamics in ways that would make modern hydrologists envious. They knew that water flowing through limestone regions was often naturally filtered and safer than water from granite highlands. They understood that spring water emerging from deep underground was generally cleaner than surface streams, no matter how clear those streams appeared. They also developed what we might call water intelligence networks. Villagers shared information about water sources, which wells had failed, where livestock had died after drinking, which streams ran clean even during droughts. This collective knowledge was literally life-saving information, passed down with the same reverence we reserve for family heirlooms. In a survival situation today, this principle still holds. Your life depends on understanding not just how to purify water, but how to source it intelligently. Lesson 2. Preserve meat with what you have. Imagine a successful hunt, a massive influx of calories that could see a family through the lean times. But it's also a race against the clock. Without refrigeration, that meat begins to rot within hours. The problem was immense. How do you make a month's worth of food last without a freezer? The answer was a full-scale assault using the tools of the earth: salt and smoke. Salting wasn't a delicate sprinkle for flavor. It was an aggressive process. Coarse salt was rubbed deep into every surface of the meat. It was then packed in barrels, completely surrounded by more salt. The principle is brilliantly simple. The salt draws moisture out of the meat through osmosis. Without water, the bacteria that cause decay can't multiply. It was a long, arduous process that demanded a deep understanding. Too little salt and you'd have a putrid mess. But salting was often just step one. For longer-term preservation, they turned to smoke. Salted meat or fish would be hung in a smokehouse, or even high in the rafters above the hearth. A slow-burning fire would smolder for days. The smoke wasn't just for flavor, it was a chemical preservative. The compounds in wood smoke are naturally antimicrobial and antioxidative, killing bacteria and stopping fats from going rancid. It also created a dry outer layer, a pellicle, acting as a physical barrier against flies and mold. This wasn't just about preserving food. It was the intelligent application of chemistry, a secret that allowed a surplus to become a lifeline. The medieval preservation arsenal extended far beyond salt and smoke. They mastered the art of confit, completely submerging meat in its own rendered fat. The fat created an airtight seal that could preserve meat for months in cool conditions. They understood that acid was another powerful preservative, using vinegar-based brines to pickle everything from vegetables to eggs to small game. Perhaps most ingeniously, they learned to combine preservation methods for maximum effectiveness. A piece of pork might be salted, then smoked, then sealed in fat, creating multiple barriers against decay. This wasn't just about making food last, it was about creating flavor profiles that made monotonous winter diets bearable. The interplay of salt, smoke, and time created complex tastes that we now pay premium prices for in artisanal delicatessens. Lesson 3. Fat keeps you alive longer than vegetable. In our modern world, fat is often demonized. We're taught to trim it, to avoid it. To a medieval peasant facing a brutal winter, this mindset would have been suicidal. They understood a harsh biological truth. Fat is the single most concentrated source of energy you can consume. When calories are life, fat is king. Vegetables were for the warmer months, but their caloric density was low. Animal fat, on the other hand, was a powerhouse of energy that could be preserved and stored, providing the fuel needed for back-breaking labor in freezing temperatures. This led to a vital skill: rendering and storing lard. Every last bit of fat from a butchered animal was treasure. It was carefully trimmed, chopped, and then gently heated in a large pot. The goal was to cook it low and slow. As the fat melted, the pure liquid gold was separated from the solid tissues, which crisped up into cracklings. Once rendered, the hot lard was strained through fine linen to remove any impurities that could cause it to spoil, poured into earthenware crocks, and stored in a cool cellar. This lard was shelf-stable for months, sometimes longer under ideal conditions. This wasn't just for cooking. A spoonful of lard was a quick energy boost. It greased tools, conditioned leather, and even made soap and candles. In a survival scenario, prioritizing the harvest and preservation of animal fat provides more than flavor. It provides the raw thermal energy needed to survive. It's a brutal lesson in nutritional priorities we've forgotten at our peril. Heating and shelter. The modern world has tamed the cold with insulation and central heating. For medieval people, the cold was a relentless, invading enemy. Every winter was a siege, and their homes were the fortresses. Their methods were born from this brutal reality, focusing not just on generating heat, but on capturing every precious degree. Lesson 4. Body heat is your best heater. A roaring fire in a medieval hall looks cozy in movies, but most of that heat went straight up a hole in the roof. Heating an entire drafty room was a fool's errand. The medieval mind knew the most reliable source of heat was the one you carried with you, your own body. The strategy wasn't to heat the space, it was to heat the person. That right there is a fundamental shift in perspective. This was most evident in their sleeping arrangements. The iconic four-poster bed wasn't just for show. Its heavy curtains and canopy trapped the occupant's body heat, creating a warm microclimate within a freezing room. But for a peasant, the solution was more direct: huddling. Families slept together, not just for lack of space, but for shared warmth. But here's what makes this even more remarkable. They developed a sort of medieval hot water bottle. Before bed, smooth, dense stones were placed in the embers of the fire. Once scorching hot, they were wrapped in thick cloth and placed in the bed. Stone is a thermal sink. It absorbs a massive amount of heat and releases it slowly over hours, providing a gentle, life-sustaining warmth through the night. Don't waste energy heating a large space. Focus your resources on a small, insulated, warm environment for your body. Medieval people also understood the critical importance of layering, but not in the way we think of it today. They practiced what we might call microclimate management. A peasant wouldn't just put on more clothes. They'd create temperature zones within their living space. The area closest to the hearth was for work that required dexterity. The middle zone was for general living. The far corners were for storage and waste. They even managed body heat strategically throughout the day. Hard physical labor was scheduled for the coldest parts of the morning, not just to get warm, but because working muscles generate heat more efficiently than shivering. They understood that sharing body heat wasn't just about sleeping arrangements, it was about timing activities so that multiple people were generating heat in the same space simultaneously. Lesson 5. Smoke follows cold air. An indoor fire is a lifesaver, but it creates a deadly problem: smoke. In a simple dwelling with a central hearth and no proper chimney, managing smoke was a critical battle. A room filled with acrid smoke wasn't just unpleasant, it was toxic and suffocating. Through brutal trial and error, medieval builders became amateur physicists. They learned a key principle of fluid dynamics. To get hot air and smoke to go up and out, you have to let cooler, denser air in to replace it. This is the draw or draft. If a house was sealed tight, the fire would sputter and smoke would pour into the room. To manage this, they had to strategically introduce cold air, cracking a door or cutting a vent near the floor. They learned to position the hearth relative to the door and smoke hole to create a stable convection current. Cold air flows in low, feeds the fire, is heated, and carries the smoke directly up and out. This is even more crucial in an improvised shelter. You must create two openings, a lower inlet for fresh air and a higher outlet for smoke. Without the inlet, the fire dies. Without the outlet, you will be overcome. The medieval peasant understood this dance of air pressure implicitly. It's a counterintuitive but vital lesson in ventilation that ensures your life-saving fire doesn't become the thing that kills you. Lesson 6. Insulation comes from dead things. Modern insulation is a marvel of material science, but the fundamental principle is ancient and brutally simple. Trap pockets of air. For our ancestors, the most abundant sources of such materials were the dead and dried remains of the natural world. Straw was stuffed into walls, piled in lofts, and spread thickly on floors to insulate from the cold ground. Feathers were a prized insulator, creating the medieval equivalent of a high-tech sleeping bag. Animal skins and furs applied the same principle of trapped air directly to the body. Even their building design incorporated this idea. Thatch roofs, made from densely packed reeds or straw, could be several feet thick. This massive layer of organic material provided an incredible insulating barrier against both winter cold and summer heat. This lesson is directly applicable today. If you need to insulate a room during a power failure, think like a medieval peasant. Dry leaves, crumpled newspapers, old clothes, anything that traps air will work. The brutal part of this lesson is accepting that comfort and cleanliness are secondary to survival. Our ancestors weren't just living in dirt huts, they were living inside intelligently designed thermal systems built from the organic cast-offs of their environment. Their insulation knowledge extended to understanding thermal mass, the ability of materials to store and release heat. They strategically placed large stones or clay vessels near the hearth during the day, allowing them to absorb heat. As the fire died down at night, these thermal masses continued radiating warmth for hours. This passive heating system required no fuel and no maintenance, just intelligent placement of materials. They also understood the principle of dead air spaces in clothing. Medieval garments weren't just thick, they were designed with loose-fitting layers that trapped air. A peasant's winter outfit was essentially a walking insulation system, with each layer serving a specific thermal purpose. The innermost layer wickered moisture, the middle layers trapped air, and the outer layer shed wind and precipitation. Preparation and improvisation. Survival isn't just knowledge, it's about the ability to apply it. And application requires tools. In an age without power tools, the ability to create, maintain, and improvise was a core life skill. A sharp knife, strong rope, and a reliable fire starter were the holy trinity of medieval technology. Lesson 7. Sharp steel beats everything. A sharp steel blade was arguably the most important tool a person could own. It was a multi-tool for preparing food, shaping wood, dressing game, and defense. But a dull knife wasn't just inefficient, it was dangerous. It requires more force, increasing the risk of a slip and a severe injury, an injury that could easily become fatal in a world without antibiotics. Therefore, the skill of sharpening was not optional. They relied on stone and leather. The process began with a coarse whetstone to establish the edge angle, or set the bevel. Holding the knife at a consistent 15 to 20 degree angle, the blade was drawn across the stone until a burr, a tiny wire of metal, formed along the opposite edge. Then they moved to a finer stone to polish and refine that edge. The final, crucial step was stropping on a strip of leather. Drawing the blade away from the cutting edge, polished the very apex to a razor finish and aligned the microscopic teeth of the blade. This entire process was a ritual of skill and patience. In a long-term scenario where your knife is your most important tool, the ability to maintain it with what you can find is not just a skill, it's a key to survival. Lesson 8. Rope can be made from anything. We buy rope in spools. Our ancestors had to make it, often from materials we'd consider wilderness debris. Their ingenuity in turning useless fibers into strong cordage is a testament to their resourcefulness. The fundamental technique is the reverse wrap. You twist a bundle of fibers clockwise until it's tight. Then you fold it in the middle. Now you have 2 strands. The magic happens next. While twisting each strand clockwise, you wrap them around each other counterclockwise. This counter-tension locks the fibers together, preventing the rope from unraveling. The real genius was in their materials. The inner bark of trees like willow, the fibrous stalks of plants like stinging nettle, even animal sinew, all were processed into incredibly strong cordage. But what if you weren't in the deep woods? Old clothing was cut into strips and twisted into surprisingly strong rope, using the same technique. This is a crucial lesson. In a survival situation, everything is a potential resource. The knowledge that you can create one of the world's most useful tools from almost anything is empowering. The sophistication of medieval rope making extended to understanding different fibers for different purposes. Nettle fiber was prized for fishing lines because it was nearly invisible underwater and resistant to rotting. Hemp made the strongest general-purpose rope but required extensive processing. Horsehair was woven into incredibly durable rope that resisted stretching, crucial for applications like well ropes, where consistency was vital. They also mastered rope splicing, joining 2 ropes together so seamlessly that the connection was often stronger than the original rope. This wasn't just about repair, it was about creating custom lengths and combining different types of rope for specific applications. A medieval craftsman could splice a thin, flexible rope to a thick, strong one, creating a tool perfectly suited for a particular job. Lesson 9. Fire without matches is mandatory. Fire is life. We've outsourced this godlike power to disposable tools. For medieval people, making fire was a fundamental skill, and they had to be masters of multiple techniques because a failed fire could mean a frozen death. The most common method was flint and steel. This isn't the flint in a modern lighter. True flint is a hard rock. The steel was a C-shaped piece of high-carbon steel. When the flint strikes the steel, it shaves off a microscopic particle of metal, which ignites from the friction and becomes a spark. But this spark is too cool to ignite a twig directly. It needs an intermediary, char cloth. This is just linen or cotton fabric that has been cooked in an airtight tin until it's carbonized. It has an incredibly low ignition temperature. A spark is caught on the char cloth, creating a tiny glowing red ember. This ember is then transferred to a tinder bundle, a nest of the finest, driest material you can find. You blow gently, feeding it oxygen until the bundle erupts into flame. Friction fire methods like the bow drill were also known, a brutally difficult but effective backup. Mastering the medieval art of flint and steel, a skill that relies on technique over disposable technology, is mandatory for anyone serious about being prepared. The peasant's pharmacy, health and medicine. In an era before emergency rooms and antibiotics, a minor injury could be a death sentence. The medieval approach to health was a brutal mix of practical first aid, deep herbal knowledge, and a stoic acceptance of pain. Their pharmacy wasn't a building, it was the forest and fields around them. Lesson 10. Pain tells you what's wrong. We live in an age where the first response to pain is to silence it with a pill. But that masks the very signals our body is sending. For a medieval person without X-rays or blood tests, pain was not just a sensation, it was information. It was a language. The type of pain, sharp or throbbing. The location, localized or radiating. The timing, constant or intermittent. All of these were clues. A sharp localized pain in the abdomen suggested one condition. A throbbing, spreading pain around a wound was a clear sign of festering infection. This diagnostic process extended beyond pain. The color of urine, the smell of a wound, the color of phlegm, these were all data points. This forced a level of bodily awareness we have largely lost. For the modern survivor, This lesson is about reconnecting with your own body. Don't just numb pain, question it. Pain isn't the enemy, it's the messenger, and ignoring that messenger can have fatal consequences. Medieval people developed what we might call diagnostic protocols that were surprisingly systematic. They understood that symptoms often appeared in patterns, and that these patterns told stories. A fever combined with a stiff neck suggested one condition, while the same fever with joint pain suggested another. They learned to track the progression of symptoms over time, understanding that the sequence of appearance was often more important than the severity. This diagnostic mindset extended beyond illness to injury assessment. They could distinguish between different types of bone breaks by the sound they made, the way the limb positioned itself, and the pattern of swelling that followed. This wasn't guesswork. It was pattern recognition, honed by generations of observers who couldn't afford to be wrong about the difference between a sprain and a fracture. Lesson 11. The plants around you are a pharmacy. Without manufactured medicines, our ancestors relied on a vast pharmacopoeia foraged from the wilderness. This wasn't guesswork. It was a science passed down through generations. One of the most essential plants was yarrow. Its common names tell the story. Soldier's woundwort, nosebleed plant. It was the medieval battlefield bandage. Crushed leaves were applied directly to a wound. Modern science confirms what they knew from experience. Yarrow has powerful hemostatic properties that staunch bleeding. It's also a natural antiseptic and anti-inflammatory. But their knowledge went far beyond a single plant. Chamomile for calming nerves. Plantain, the common weed, for soothing insect bites and drawing out splinters. Comfrey root, which they called knitbone, was used to create a cast-like dressing for broken bones. They knew which parts of the plant to use, when to harvest them, and how to prepare them as teas, salves, or poultices. Learning to recognize just a handful of useful plants in your area turns the landscape from a green backdrop into a living pharmacy, ready when modern medicine is out of reach. Lesson 12. Sleep when it's dark, work when it's light. We fight our body's natural rhythms with artificial light and caffeine. Our ancestors, by necessity, lived in tune with the planet's cycles, and their sleep patterns were radically different. Historical evidence suggests many practiced what's now called segmented sleep. This typically involved a first sleep beginning after sunset. They would sleep for roughly 4 hours, then wake after midnight into a quiet period that could last an hour or more. This wasn't insomnia, it was a normal part of the night, used to tend the fire, pray, or reflect. Then they would go back for a second sleep until dawn. While it seems strange to us, some researchers believe this biphasic pattern may actually be more natural for humans. Studies show that when people are removed from artificial light, their sleep often drifts toward this model. In a survival scenario, aligning your activity with the sun conserves fuel and energy, ensuring you are resting during the coldest, most dangerous part of the night. Sometimes the most advanced technique is to surrender to the ancient rhythm of the world. The shield of the village. The romantic image of the lone survivor is largely a myth. For most of human history, and especially in the medieval period, survival was a team sport. The true shield against hardship was the cohesion of the community. In a world of profound uncertainty, your neighbors were your most valuable asset. Lesson 13. Know your neighbors before you need them. It's possible to live for years without knowing the names of the people next door. To a medieval villager, this was unthinkable and deeply dangerous. Your neighbors were your safety net. Mutual aid wasn't a policy, it was the fabric of daily life. If a house caught fire, the village formed a bucket brigade. If a farmer fell ill during harvest, his neighbors worked his fields. This system of reciprocal obligation was understood by everyone. You helped your neighbor because you knew with certainty that one day you would need them to do the same. This web of interdependence, where the blacksmith relied on the farmer and the farmer on the weaver, made the entire community more resilient than any single family. They were a single, complex organism working towards collective survival. A far more effective strategy than the lone wolf is to build a community before the crisis hits. Get to know your neighbors now. Who has medical training? Who's a mechanic? In a disaster, the first responders are always your neighbors. The medieval understanding of community resilience went deeper than simple mutual aid. They created what we might call complementary skill ecosystems. The village wasn't just a collection of individuals. It was a carefully balanced system where different skills reinforced each other. The carpenter needed the blacksmith's tools. the blacksmith needed the farmer's charcoal. This interdependence created what economists now recognize as anti-fragile systems, networks that actually become stronger under stress. When crisis hit, the village's response wasn't to compete for resources, but to integrate more tightly. Skills that seemed separate in good times became part of unified survival strategies in bad times. The weaver who also knew herbal medicine, the farmer who could also work leather. This redundancy and cross-training made the entire community nearly impossible to completely disable. Lesson 14. Hide your surplus. In a world where hunger was a constant threat, a surplus of food was wealth, and wealth attracts unwanted attention. Announcing your preparedness was an invitation to be plundered. The brutal lesson was this: it's not enough to have supplies, you have to be able to keep them. The art of caching, hiding surplus food and valuables, was a vital security measure. The goal was to use places thieves would overlook. They might lift a heavy flagstone in the cottage floor, dig a cavity, place sealed jars of grain inside, and carefully replace the stone. The base of a stone wall, a hollowed-out tree, a small cave, all served as discreet hiding spots. The key was deception and distribution. They never stored everything in one place, a primary cache in the house, a secondary cache hidden elsewhere. This way, even if their home was raided, they wouldn't lose everything. This mindset is directly applicable to modern prepping. Don't advertise your supplies, distribute your caches, create layers of security through obscurity. In hard times, the best defense is for no one to know you have anything worth defending. Lesson 15. Bad times don't last, but preparation does. The medieval world was a cycle of feast and famine. This taught them a profound lesson in foresight. They understood that bad times were not a possibility. They were an inevitability. Winter would come. The only way to survive was through slow, steady, continuous preparation. Survival was a year-round job. This mindset manifested in a system of gradual accumulation. When a harvest came in, a portion was immediately set aside for long-term storage, and another portion as seed for next year. This was non-negotiable. They practiced a first-in, first-out system that was second nature, using the oldest supplies first to ensure nothing went to waste. Firewood was gathered and seasoned for months. Tools were repaired during slow periods. This final lesson is the philosophy that underpins all the others. Preparation is not a single act, it is a continuous process. For the modern person, this means building your supplies gradually. Add a few extra cans to your cart each week. Learn one new skill each season. The medieval peasant knew the wolf was always at the door, but they also knew that a strong wall, a full larder, and a cohesive community, all built during the good times, were enough to see them through the storm. From the simple genius of a hot stone in a bed to the life-saving chemistry of salted meat, the skills of our ancestors were anything but primitive. They were masters of their environment, armed with a deep, practical wisdom born from pure, relentless necessity. Their lives were a testament to the power of resilience, ingenuity, and community. We've explored 15 of their most brutal and effective lessons, and each one holds a powerful truth for our comfortable world. They teach us to be observant, resourceful, and to value timeless principles of survival. This lost knowledge isn't just a historical curiosity, it's a blueprint for self-reliance. It's a reminder that the most powerful survival tool you will ever have is not in a bag, but in your mind. The question is, which of these lessons will you carry with you? What do you think is the most underrated medieval survival skill? Is there a brutal lesson we missed? Let us know in the comments below. We read every single one. And if you believe this lost knowledge is worth preserving, be sure to like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into historical wisdom. Stay prepared and stay safe.